The scent of rose incense was the same as the day I died. That was the first thing I noticed when my eyes opened again. That sharp sweetness, curling through the great hall like smoke, clinging to velvet drapes and polished marble. My hand trembled slightly against my gown, the same silver-blue silk I had worn on the day of the choosing. The day my sister and I were promised to our fates. Only this time I already knew how it ended. Around me the air shimmered with witchlight. The crowd of nobles, humans, witches, and emissaries from the vampire and werewolf courts watched with eager eyes. I could almost taste the tension, the mix of pride and desperation. The kingdom was fractured. Vampires starving in their dark halls, wolves fighting for scraps under the moon, humans caught in between. The witches were the thread holding it all together. And now, once again, that thread began with us, the daughters of the Moonveil Coven. My sister stood beside me, radiant in crimson. June had always loved to be the sun in any room, and she shone now, golden curls tumbling like spun fire. Her lips curved into that same confident smile she wore the first time we stood here. The smile that had hidden everything. The elders' voices echoed across the hall. The daughters of Lady Seraphine and Lord Armand shall bind their unions to seal peace among the realms. I felt my stomach twist. I remembered what came next. In my first life, June had chosen the Werewolf Alpha, Max of Thornvale, the fierce, honorable one. And I had chosen Lord Jasper, the vampire lord of the Crimson Keep. That choice had written our deaths in blood. But this time the moment hung differently. June's hand rose first, graceful, deliberate. I choose Lord Jasper, she said, her voice steady and bright. The hall erupted in gasps. Even Father's proud smile flickered with surprise. Mother clasped her hands, delight flashing in her eyes before she glanced at me. The quiet one, the shadow beside her golden daughter. For a heartbeat everything blurred. June had chosen differently. I felt the weight of memory press behind my ribs. The fire, the screams, the blood that soaked the floor when she ended it all out of jealousy. My heart pounded as if it still remembered dying. But I said nothing. When the elders turned to me, waiting for my answer, I simply smiled. Then I shall take Alpha Max. No one applauded this time. Not like before, when June's choice of the werewolf had been a clever, diplomatic move. Now it felt like an afterthought. The forgotten sister picking what was left. But I didn't mind. Not anymore. June looked at me from across the dais, confusion flickering in her eyes. She didn't understand why I wasn't fighting her for Jasper. Why I wasn't protesting the way I had before. But that was the thing about memory, it makes fools of us once but never twice. The ceremony continued. Incense drifted higher, sealing the moment. June's laughter rang bright and victorious, while I felt a strange calm settle over me. I remembered everything, the endless halls of Jasper's keep, where beauty turned to rot, and the loneliness that wrapped around me like a shroud. I remembered how my magic had made his kind strong, how the bloodlines of vampires had flourished because of me, and how June in her envy had destroyed it all. Now it would all unfold again but differently. When the ceremony ended, June approached me, her lips curved in a smug, knowing smile. "Seems I've learned from your mistakes, dear sister," she said softly. Her perfume was sweet, the same as the roses scattered across the marble floor. "The vampires are the future. You'll see. The wolves will always be beasts of the dirt." I met her gaze and smiled gently. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they'll surprise you." Her laughter was musical, hollow. "You always were fond of strays." Before, her words would have stung. I would have gone to bed in tears, praying our parents might love me half as much as her. Now I simply turned away. The ache in my chest had burned itself out long ago. As the crowd dispersed, our parents swept June into their arms. Father's voice boomed with pride. "My daughter, the consort of Lord Jasper. A union of prestige." Mother beamed, nodding to the nobles who offered congratulations. They barely looked at me. I watched them for a moment, then turned toward the courtyard, the air cool and clean under the fading sun. The scent of roses lingered, but beyond it, I could smell rain and pine, the scent of the wild lands where the werewolves roamed. That was my path now. I didn't need their pride. I didn't need their approval. I needed peace. As I stepped into the garden, a deep, quiet voice spoke behind me. "You do not seem disappointed." I turned. It was Max, taller than I remembered, his eyes steady, calm as the forest. His presence had always been like that, grounded, unshaken like the earth itself. In my past life, he had been June's husband, and I had barely spoken to him. Now fate had rewritten the lines. "I'm not disappointed," I said softly. "Just relieved." He tilted his head. Most witches tremble at the thought of living among wolves. I smiled faintly. Maybe they've never listened to them howl. His expression softened, curiosity flickering behind his eyes. "Then perhaps you'll fit better than most." A small breeze stirred the hem of my gown. In that moment I felt the pull of destiny shifting, like threads being rearranged by unseen hands. As I walked away, I caught one last glimpse of June on the balcony, Jasper at her side. She looked radiant, glowing under the golden chandeliers. I could almost see the dream she thought she was living. The immortality, the wealth, the endless admiration. But I knew better. I knew what lurked behind the silk curtains and the polished smiles of the undead. I whispered to myself as I crossed into the moonlight. This time, I'll let her keep her crown of roses. I've no need for thorns. The night stretched ahead, vast and alive. I didn't know what awaited me in Thornvale, among the wolves and their raw world of moonlight and claw. But for the first time in 2 lifetimes I felt free. And as the moon rose high above the coven's spires, I swore quietly to the night that I would live differently this time. Not chasing love, not chasing approval, but chasing the truth of who I was meant to be. The morning after the choosing, the manor was alive with laughter, though none of it was mine. Servants bustled down the halls carrying trunks and gowns, ribbons and jewels, all for June's departure to the Crimson Keep. Mother fluttered around her like a bird guarding its brightest chick. Father barked orders with the energy of a man who believed his bloodline had just descended. And me? I sat quietly by the window watching the sun rise. It was strange remembering how much that light used to hurt, how envy had wrapped its fingers around my heart so tightly I could barely breathe. In the last life I'd longed to be where June was now, surrounded by silk and adoration, the chosen daughter with destiny shining on her like a crown. Now I simply felt distant. A knock came at the door. It was June. She entered without waiting for me to answer, as she always did. She looked radiant, her gown a deep wine red, trimmed in gold, her hair glinting like polished copper. She had always loved the colors of blood and flame. "You could at least pretend to be happy for me," she said. I smiled faintly. "I am happy for you, June. Truly." She frowned as if unsure how to respond to kindness. "You sound like you're mocking me." "I'm not." She tilted her head, studying me. "You seem different. Quieter but heavier. Did the idea of living among wolves crush your spirit already?" Her words might have stung once, but now I only shook my head. "No. I just learned what matters." She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Honestly, April, you've always been too simple. You think peace can be found in the woods? Power is what keeps us safe. Power and reputation. And love." I asked softly. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled with that same practiced charm. "Love comes after power. It always does." The sunlight caught her face then, and I saw the faintest flicker of fear behind her eyes. But June had always been good at hiding cracks. She turned to leave. "I'll send for you once I'm settled in the Crimson Keep. You'll envy me then, I promise you that." Her laughter trailed behind her as she walked away. It sounded almost musical. Almost. By midday, the courtyard was full of farewells. June rode away in a carriage of black glass and silver trim, escorted by vampires dressed in crimson cloaks. The crowd clapped as if sending off a queen. I stood at the edge of the path, the wind tugging gently at my gown. June didn't look back. When the dust settled, silence returned. Only then did Mother notice me standing there. She sighed softly. "April, you could smile more. This match with the wolves. It's not ideal, but at least you won't starve." I bit back a laugh. "I'll try not to, Mother." She nodded, distracted already. "Good girl. Be useful, and perhaps one day you'll make us proud." Father barely acknowledged me as he turned back to the house, muttering something about diplomatic scraps. I watched them disappear inside. The ache I expected didn't come. Maybe it had burned out completely in the fire of my last death. I whispered quietly, "You don't have to love me this time." Then I turned toward the waiting riders from Thornvale. The journey to the werewolf lands took 3 days through forest and mist. The air grew wilder with each mile, filled with pine, earth, and the distant calls of unseen creatures. The farther we rode, the more I felt my magic stir, like a flame catching its breath. Thornvale wasn't like the stone castles of vampires, or the marble towers of witches. It was alive, built of black oak and living vines, perched high in the mountains where moonlight painted everything silver. When we arrived, the gates opened with a deep creak, and Alpha Max himself stood waiting. He was dressed simply, in dark leather and a cloak of fur. His eyes caught the light, the same steady piercing gray I remembered. "Lady April," he said, bowing his head slightly. "Welcome to Thornvale." "Thank you," I replied, stepping down from the carriage. "It's different from what I imagined." "Different can be good," he said, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "Here we breathe fresh air and tell the truth. You'll find no painted smiles among us." That line made me smile. I think I've had enough painted smiles to last a lifetime. He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to read the layers beneath my calm. But he didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the great hall. Inside, the warmth of the hearth filled the space. Wolves in human form, men and women with amber eyes and quiet strength, watched curiously as I passed. There was no contempt in their stares, only curiosity. "Which?" one murmured. "You're not afraid?" I met their gaze. "Should I be?" A few chuckled and the tension melted. Max nodded approvingly. "You'll do fine here." That night, I was given chambers overlooking the valley. I stood by the window watching the moon rise over the forests. It was enormous and pale, casting silver light over the dark trees. I could hear howls echoing through the distance, weaving into the wind. In that sound I felt something ancient, a rhythm older than any spell, older than the bloodlines of witches. When I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the past life. Jasper's cold halls, the endless nights of hunger and loneliness. June's laughter echoing through walls that were never mine. And now she was living that life instead. Part of me wondered how long it would take before the shine began to fade. I turned from the window and whispered into the quiet, "This time may you find what you think you want, sister. And may I finally find peace." The next morning, Max invited me to the training fields. "Do you fight?" he asked, watching me from across the ring as warriors sparred nearby. "Only with words," I said. He grinned. "Then you'll fit right in." He offered me a wooden staff. I hesitated, but something in his calm expression pushed me to take it. We circled slowly. He moved with controlled grace, his strength effortless. When he lunged, I parried instinctively, the staff crackling faintly with my magic. His eyebrows lifted. "You channel your energy through wood?" "Through everything," I said, smiling. Our movements slowed, turning into a quiet rhythm of motion and breath. When the bout ended, neither of us claimed victory. He leaned on his staff. "You're different from what I expected." "Good different or troublesome different?" "Still deciding," he said, smiling faintly. Something unspoken passed between us then. Not passion, not yet, but recognition. A shared understanding between two people who had known what it meant to be underestimated. As I left the field, I heard him call after me. "Witch or not, you have the spirit of a wolf." For the first time in a long while, I laughed quietly, genuinely. That night, as the moonlight spilled across my chamber floor, I traced faint runes in the air with my fingertips. My magic shimmered soft and golden. The power that had once strengthened the vampires now pulsed differently, resonating with the energy of the land. It was alive, responsive, protective. Maybe this was how it was always meant to be, not to feed the dead, but to protect the living. I whispered to the glowing runes, "Let this magic do good this time." The symbols flared and sank into the earth, spreading warmth through the stone beneath my feet. Outside, I heard wolves howl, not in sorrow but in harmony. And as I stood there, I realized I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. Not here. Not in this life. The days in Thornvale flowed like water. There were no jeweled halls or silken gowns here, no endless feasts or ceremonial flattery. Yet there was peace, raw, unpolished, honest peace. I learned the rhythm of the wolves, how they ran as one when the moon rose, how they ate together, laughed together, fought and healed together. They lived with a simplicity that made me ache with something like envy, not for luxury but for belonging. The pack had begun to accept me. Some even sought me out for spells to bless their hunts or heal their wounds. My magic thrived in this place, humming softly under my skin, alive with the pulse of the land. I could feel it taking root, weaving itself into the bones of Thornvale. One evening Max found me near the cliffside where the forest met the mountains. I was kneeling among the night-blooming flowers, tracing runes into the soil. "You're strengthening the wards," he said. His voice was deep, quiet, always carrying that low rumble like thunder on the horizon. "Their structure was fading," I replied. "They were built for brute defense, not balance. The energy here wants harmony, not walls." He watched me work for a while, then crouched beside me. "You speak as if the land listens to you." "It does," I said, smiling faintly. "It always has. It just needed someone to listen back." He chuckled softly. "You sound like one of our old shamans. They say the moon speaks to those who hear her heartbeat. Then perhaps she and I are old friends." For a long moment we were quiet. The moonlight painted his hair silver, his eyes softening as they caught mine. There was a gentleness to him that I hadn't noticed before. Strength without pride, command without cruelty. "Do you miss your family?" he asked finally. I hesitated. I used to. I wanted their love more than anything. But now, I think I just wanted peace, and I mistook their approval for it. He nodded slowly. "Peace is rarer than love, I think." That line lingered in my mind long after he left. Weeks passed. Thornvale flourished. Crops grew richer, the moonstone mines glimmered brighter, and even the wolves' howls took on a tone of strength rather than despair. My magic was changing them, shaping their fate just as it had once shaped the vampires. The difference was this time it gave rather than took. But balance has its price. While Thornvale grew strong, word began to spread that the vampires were weakening. Lord Jasper's keep, once dazzling with cold beauty, had grown dim. Their blood stores spoiled faster. Their crops withered under the night fog. In June, the letters began arriving not long after. At first, they were written in her elegant hand, each line dripping with self-satisfaction. "Dearest sister, I dine with Jasper under chandeliers of crystal. He calls me his moonlight. The court adores me. You wouldn't believe how well I fit among them." I smiled faintly at those first few letters, imagining her twirling through candlelight, pretending she belonged in the world of the undead. But soon the tone changed. "The keep grows colder by the week. Jasper says it is nothing, but I see the hunger in his eyes. The servants whisper when they think I cannot hear. Has your wolf taken good care of you?" And then another. "Something is wrong, April. The blood magic is fading. Jasper says I am weak, that I do not give what you once did. What did you do, sister? Tell me." I folded that one carefully and tucked it away. By the time the next came, the handwriting had grown frantic. "You knew, didn't you? You knew your blood was what made them strong. You let me take this life knowing it would crumble. Was this your revenge?" I didn't reply. One night while I was tending to the moonwell, a pool of silver water said to mirror truth. I felt a tug deep in my chest, like an invisible thread pulling taut. A vision rippled across the surface of the water. June standing in a dark hall, her eyes hollow, her gown torn. Vampires moved around her like shadows, their faces gaunt, their eyes burning with hunger. Lord Jasper stood before her, expressionless. "You have failed me," he said. His voice was a blade, smooth and cruel. June fell to her knees. "I did everything you asked. Your magic was supposed to sustain us," he said coldly. "But you are not her." And then the vision broke. The moonwell's glow faded to black. I sat there, heart aching with a mix of pity and sorrow. I had never wanted vengeance, not truly. I only wanted to live without the weight of her envy crushing me. Now, I wondered if she understood what she had taken from herself. The next morning Max found me again by the cliffs. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I've been remembering." He didn't ask what. Instead, he looked out across the valley where the mist curled between the trees. "Sometimes memories are just ghosts looking for a place to rest." I smiled softly. "Then perhaps it's time I built them a home." He turned to face me fully. "You've changed, Thornvale. My people thrive because of you. I've never seen anything like it." I shook my head. "It isn't me. It's the balance. I only gave what was already there the chance to breathe." He studied me for a long moment. You speak of the world as though it's a living thing. I think that's what I like most about you. His words caught me off guard. The warmth in them was unguarded, genuine. I felt the smallest flutter in my chest, the kind that warned of something new, something delicate. He stepped closer. If it's balance you seek, you've given us that. But what about you, April? Who gives it back to you? I met his gaze. I don't know. Maybe the moon. Maybe the quiet. Maybe me, he said softly. It wasn't a promise. Just a thought, spoken aloud into the space between us. But it lingered like the aftertaste of honey, warm and unexpected. For a moment the air felt charged, like the world was listening. Then from far away, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faintest whisper of my sister's voice. I turned sharply, the hairs on my neck rising. Something's shifting, I murmured. Max frowned. What is it? Fate, I said quietly. It's never content to leave us be. That night I dreamed of roses. They grew wild across the marble floors of the Crimson Keep, their petals dripping blood. June stood in the center, her hands red, her eyes hollow. She whispered my name, not in anger but in regret. When I woke, the moonlight was pale against my window, and I could still hear her voice echoing softly. You knew. You always knew. I pressed a hand against the glass, whispering into the quiet. I didn't want this for you, June. But maybe now you'll finally see. Outside, the wolves howled beneath the moon. Not for battle but for remembrance. And somewhere in the distance, the balance of blood and magic began to shift again. The wind had changed. Even before the ravens arrived, Thornvale felt different, heavier somehow. The sky had turned a deeper shade of gray, the kind that warned of storms. My magic thrummed under my skin, uneasy. Something was unraveling far to the east. The first raven came bearing a crest of dark wax, the sigil of the vampire lord. I recognized it instantly. Max watched as I broke the seal. From your sister? Yes, I murmured, though I already know what it will say. The parchment inside was torn at the edges, the ink smudged as if written in haste. April, I cannot stop the decay. Jasper's hunger grows each night. The others whisper that our line will end before the next moon. You must help me. I beg you, do not let me fall to this curse. My fingers tightened around the letter. I remembered how she'd looked in the vision, trembling, desperate, surrounded by shadows that had once adored her. The envy that had once burned in her eyes had turned to fear. She's reaping what she sowed, Max said quietly. She's still my sister, I replied, voice soft. And though she cursed me once, I can't watch her drown. Max's gaze was steady. Then what will you do? I will answer her call. He stepped closer, eyes searching mine. You owe her nothing, April. Maybe not, I said. But I owe myself peace. And peace doesn't come from turning away. We rode through the night, the path lit by pale moonlight and the soft glow of my spells. The forests thinned as we approached the lands of the vampires. The trees gave way to stone cliffs and ancient ruins. By the time we reached the Crimson Keep, dawn was only a faint blush on the horizon, and the castle stood in ruin. The grand gates hung open, their iron twisted and blackened. The once lustrous marble now bore cracks that ran like veins. A cold mist coiled across the courtyard, thick with the scent of blood and decay. Stay close, Max said, his hand on his sword. We passed through the silent halls. Shadows moved along the walls, whispering in voices I could not place. Not alive, not entirely dead. And then in the grand hall where chandeliers once sparkled like frozen stars, I saw her. June. She was standing before the throne, her hair disheveled, her skin pale as ash. Her gown hung in tatters streaked with dried blood. When she turned to face me, I barely recognized her. April. Her voice was thin, broken. You came. I did, I said softly, though I wish I hadn't had to. A bitter laugh slipped from her lips. You always were the merciful one. Lord Jasper sat slumped upon his throne, motionless. His eyes were open but lifeless, his once perfect face now sunken, the veins beneath his skin dark as ink. He's gone, June whispered. They're all gone. The coven, the guards, even the servants. One by one, the hunger consumed them. I stepped closer, my heart heavy. And you? Her lips trembled. I thought I could have what you had. The admiration, the peace, the beauty. But I didn't understand what made it so. It wasn't your place that made you blessed, April. It was you. I said nothing. I thought if I took what you had, I'd finally be happy. Her eyes filled with tears. But happiness isn't something you steal. It's something you earn. The silence that followed felt sacred, fragile. I came to help, I said at last. If I can still save what remains. She laughed bitterly. There's nothing left to save. Her gaze flicked toward Jasper's body, then back to me. The blood magic you gave him, it was born of sacrifice. You gave of yourself willingly, didn't you? I nodded. Magic without choice is poison. She sank to her knees. Then I was doomed from the start. The room grew colder. The air thickened, shimmering faintly with dark magic. June, I said carefully, you have to let go. This castle, this curse, it feeds on regret. If you keep clinging to it, you'll never break free. She looked up at me, her expression torn between fury and sorrow. I can't. I made this bed of blood. It's all I have left. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on hers. Her skin was icy. Then let me help you end it. For a moment she didn't move. Then she whispered, do it. I closed my eyes and began to weave the spell. A binding and a release. Magic rippled through the hall like a sigh, drawing in the lingering spirits, the dying embers of the vampire's power. The walls groaned. The chandeliers fell. The crimson glass shattered into 1,000 shards of light. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, the grand hall was empty. No bodies, no ghosts. Just dust and moonlight. June was gone. Outside, dawn had fully broken. The first sunlight in decades touched the crimson keep, washing its stones in gold. Max stood waiting, his expression unreadable. She's at peace, I said quietly. He nodded. And you? I think. I finally am too. We watched as the light crept higher, burning away the mist. For the first time I saw grass sprouting between the cracks of the ancient stones. Life returning where death had reigned. Max reached for my hand. You've done what few could. You've given this cursed land a chance to breathe again. I turned to him, the weight of 2 lives lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't mercy that brought me here. It was understanding. I know now that every life, every choice carries its own truth. He smiled faintly. And what truth have you found? That love isn't about being chosen, I said softly. It's about choosing, even when no one else does. He squeezed my hand, the warmth grounding me in a way no spell ever could. Then choose, he murmured. I met his gaze. I already have. The wind stirred again. Not heavy this time but light, like the world exhaling after a long-held breath. As we rode away from the ruins, I glanced back one last time. Sunlight streamed through the broken spires, catching on the remnants of crimson glass. For a heartbeat, it looked like the keep was weeping light instead of blood. And I thought of June, not as the sister who betrayed me, but as the girl who never learned how to forgive herself. Maybe somewhere beyond this life she would finally find peace. The moon rose full and gentle that night, silver light spilling across Thornvale's hills like a blessing. The air carried the scent of pine and the distant hum of wolf song. It had been weeks since I'd returned from the ruins of the Crimson Keep, yet echoes of that place still lingered at the edge of my dreams. June's face would come to me sometimes, not in malice anymore, but in quiet remembrance. Her laughter as children, the way she'd braid flowers into my hair, her jealousy like a shadow she never managed to escape. I no longer saw her as my curse. I saw her as the part of me that once begged for love in all the wrong places. Tonight, though, the ache was softer. The pack had gathered around great fires, their howls a chorus beneath the moon. There was celebration in the air. Not for war or conquest, but for renewal. Crops flourished, the borders were safe, and peace, that rarest of gifts, had taken root. I stood apart for a while, watching the flicker of firelight dance over faces filled with joy. Children ran barefoot across the grass. Warriors laughed, their mugs raised to the sky. It struck me how beautiful it was. A life not drenched in grandeur or blood, but simple, alive, and true. Do you always watch from the edges? Max's voice came from behind me, warm and teasing. I turned to find him stepping out of the shadows, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Someone has to make sure the fires don't burn down your precious forest, I said. He chuckled, the sound deep and easy. If they do, you'll just charm it back to life. I tilted my head. You sound very sure of my magic. I've seen what you can do, he said, his gaze softening. But it's not your magic that keeps this place alive, April. It's you. I looked away, embarrassed by the warmth in his voice. You give me too much credit. No, he said quietly. Not enough. The way he said it made something stir deep within me. A pull I'd resisted for so long. We stood there for a moment, the night wrapping around us quiet and alive. I saw light return to the Crimson Keep before we left, he said. The curse broke because of you. It broke because June finally let go, I murmured. Maybe because I did too. He nodded slowly, watching me with that steady calm I had come to rely on. You've carried a heavy burden across 2 lives. Maybe it's time to lay it down. I smiled faintly. And what would I do without my burdens? Live, he said simply. That word lingered in the air like a spell. Later, when the fires had burned low and the pack had drifted into sleep, I walked alone into the woods. The moon was high, the world silver and still. I stopped by the moonwell, the same pool where I'd seen June's downfall. Its waters shimmered now, clear and peaceful. When I looked into it, I saw my reflection, the same face, the same eyes, but softer, freer somehow. I forgive you, I whispered to the image. For everything, for wanting too much, for loving too hard, for not being enough for them. The water rippled, catching the moonlight like a smile. Behind me I heard footsteps approach. I thought I'd find you here, Max said. You're very persistent, I teased. He shrugged lightly. Wolves don't let the ones they care for wander off into the woods alone. I laughed softly, the sound surprising even me. And do I count as one of those now? He didn't answer at once. Instead, he came closer until the distance between us was filled with the scent of pine and warmth and something quietly electric. April, he said, voice low. You've changed my people. You've changed me. You came here from a world of blood and betrayal. And somehow you gave us hope. I looked up at him, my heart steady and strange. You give me too much credit again. He smiled. Maybe. But I'd rather overestimate you than ever underestimate what you've survived. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The night hummed softly around us, cicadas, wind, the murmur of magic in the soil. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch hesitant but sure. You don't have to answer now, he said quietly. But if one day you ever choose to stay, really stay, I'll be here. I felt my chest tighten with something warm and unfamiliar. I don't belong to anyone, Max. I know, he said, smiling faintly. That's what makes your choice worth waiting for. For the first time in both my lives, I didn't feel torn between what I should want and what I truly did. There was no need to chase love, no desperation to prove my worth. I simply existed, whole, imperfect, enough. And that, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. Days turned into weeks, and life in Thornvale settled into a rhythm of peace. I began teaching young witches how to balance their power with the world's flow. They called me the Silver Mage. Not because of my hair, but because my magic no longer burned red as it once had. It glowed soft and silver now, calm as moonlight. Sometimes I'd catch Max watching me from afar, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his eyes. He never rushed me, never claimed me. He simply stayed, a constant presence, a reminder that love need not demand to be proven. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blushed pink, I stood at the cliffs overlooking Thornvale. The same place I'd stood months ago, lost and uncertain. Now I felt the earth hum beneath my feet, alive, grateful. I thought of June again, and for the first time I didn't feel pain. Only understanding. She had been a mirror of everything I once feared becoming. But in losing her, I had found myself. As the wind swept through my hair, carrying the scent of rain and pine, I whispered a final goodbye to the past. May you find peace, sister, I said softly, wherever your soul wanders. A single silver feather drifted down from the sky, landing at my feet. I smiled. A sign perhaps, or simply the world's way of answering. Behind me I heard Max approach, his voice a low rumble. Talking to the wind again? I turned, smiling. It listens better than most people. He laughed quietly. Then I'll try to do better. I looked at him, really looked. The faint scars at his jaw, the strength in his stance, the kindness in his eyes. There was something eternal in him, not immortal like Jasper but lasting in a way that mattered more. Maybe, I said. You already do. He reached for my hand and this time I didn't pull away. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the first stars bloomed across the sky. We stood there, the Silver Mage and the Wolf King, not as fate's victims but as its quiet rebels. Proof that even after lifetimes of pain, the heart can still find its way home. And for the first time I didn't fear the future. I welcomed it. In the end I learned that peace isn't found in power or approval. It's found in choosing yourself, even when the world does not. If April's journey moved you, let her lesson stay with you. Leave a like to help more dreamers find this story. And subscribe to join me for the next tale of love, loss, and second chances.